We really have to stop leaking our wealth. We are abundant. Don't you let anybody tell you that we're not abundant. The amount of money that the Black diaspora spends on hair care, beauty care, we have money. There's just the inefficiency of how it's being spent, allocated, and shared in resources. So one, we have to stop leaking our wealth. Two, find actual mechanisms of collective pooling our resources so public enabling environments can be built. And that could be done through a DAF or a donor advised fund, right? So that finally we can, stop the leakage, fill the knowledge gap, audit your assets, and then ultimately have dignity and pride that we are actually uplifting our community.
Welcome to Black Philanthropy, Our Stories, where each episode spotlights awesome Black and African American leaders committed to transforming lives and communities through philanthropy. These authentic conversations will inspire, challenge, and remind you you are not alone. Here's your host, award-winning writer, director, and founder of Samuel and Murray, Michelle Renee Jackson.
I am so grateful today to have our next awesome guest, Chevelle Dixon, who is a fellow Harvard alum. For those of our listeners who may not already be aware of what you're up to in the world, can you just share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Chevelle Dixon. Whatever time you're watching it, from wherever you are in the world, I'm the founder and managing director of Pan-African Solutions Consulting. It's a strategic consulting firm that focuses on amplifying, connecting, and really collaborating for the African diaspora to uplift authentic stories of the people who are actually doing the work on the ground. We do that through a couple of ways, primarily through fundraising, through strategic development and supporting nonprofits and boards, and also special events for large organizations to bring the African diaspora together. We were founded 12 years ago. We're on our 13th year. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We were founded in 2013. And it's been a journey, but I'm really grateful to be here. In my career, I've been a fundraiser. I really feel like my career has been a path of three ways. It's been about making the ask, making the decisions, and then making the connections.
Can you share for our listeners if there is anyone in your community, in your life, that you honor in the work that you do when it relates to philanthropy?
From my life, I've really been embedded with the character of servant leadership. Throughout my academic life, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. That's just ingrained in a lot of the organizations and what I do. But it all really started at home with this beautiful woman, my grandmother. I call her affectionately Grandma Princess, but her name is Sarah Lee Dixon. She actually, this week, we celebrated the 11th year of her passing. She was an amazing woman who was, actually, I have some artifacts if you don't mind.
Please, we'd love to see that.
I do. So one, she had a really strong commitment to being industrious. She was a very strong business-minded woman. And she came to New York. Actually, this is when she was 18 years old when she came to New York from down south. But this is a certificate from the New York Urban League. She was in a workforce development program. And this is from December 1970. Which landed her at Merrill Lynch and really kind of put the industriousness and focus on business world. When I came to her house on the weekends, she was always either having the Golf Channel on, and I'm like, where are you getting golf from? Because she's having these conversations at Merrill Lynch, and she had to be up to speed with that. Also, the Weather Channel. That's why I was up to date with the storm. Another thing, and God bless everybody through the storm. Another artifact is also her commitment to community. This is from Mayor Ed Koch in in appreciation of a dedicated volunteer service to the New York City Housing Authority. Signed Mayor Ed Koch in 1980. So, and this is 5 years before I was born. So everything that I do is it's really special to honor her on her 11th anniversary of her passing, but more importantly, it's an honor to uplift her legacy and continue it in community service and staying in the community and being an active vocal advocate. And then also 3, being business-minded and industrious.
Chevelle, can you say a little bit more about when you think about Black philanthropy? What does that really mean for you?
It's so funny when I think of Black philanthropy. When we were celebrating the 50th year of hip hop, I had the opportunity to lead a discussion for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and I joined the Bronx Community Foundation with the Brooklyn Community Foundation executives together, and we talked about the birth of hip hop actually being a Black philanthropic movement.
Say more about that.
When I
How's
think
that?
exactly, so back in the day when hip hop was founded in the Bronx, it was founded as a back to school jam. For those of you who aren't from New York, it's basically the community coming together right before school at the end of summer to bring book bags, to bring papers, to bring pencils, erasers, have an outdoor party in the park, have some food, fill up the bags so the kids can have something to go to school. That was actually how they started hip hop in the projects in the Bronx. So when we think about philanthropy, you have to understand some of the major institutions that are important not only to world culture, but to Black culture is actually giving as a community, pulling together because we understand it's the under-resourced public good of making sure that our children are educated and have dignity with stuff and also possessions that they need to go to be successful at school.
When you think about Black philanthropy, what does that actually look like today, right now?
We give Black philanthropy at our religious institutions through tithing. We give Black philanthropy through, like as I mentioned, services, networks, watching someone's child after school. We give Black philanthropy by doing tutoring. If I have a resource in my home that I find somebody else can use, for instance, prom dresses. There's big prom dresses, back to school drives, donating things like that. So there's so many ways that we give right now in-kind gifts outside of our actual dollars to support public goods and the community.
Where do you see yourself in that definition of Black philanthropy, Chevelle?
I see myself in so many areas of it. It's not just one place, right? I am a giver. I donate myself, right? I donate to the institutions that, uplifted me, such as Prep for Prep or Harvard or the Nightingale Bamford School. I make financial contributions to those academic institutions. I also was a fundraiser for these academic institutions. I used to fundraise and make calls on the phone-a-thon for Harvard, for Prep for Prep, and for Nightingale. All of these institutions that I gave back through servant leadership. Thirdly, leading, helping others understand how to apply for grants. I definitely led some conversations with people for a nonprofit that I was helping, a faith-based organization that had a commitment to give 10% of their earnings back into the community. However, they realized there was a shortfall in the gaps of people's knowledge on how to correctly fill out grants. So basically educating the people, leading them, also for providing a resource, being a source of resource information. It takes nothing to pass along an opportunity to someone, pass along a resource to someone, or amplify the work of someone else. And then finally, fifth, I find my place in philanthropy of creating the environment where people can collaborate and have fun. So that's through special events, that's through amplifying their work, and that's creating actual places where we cannot just look at the return on investment, ROI, but also the return on engagement and start thinking about leading in other metrics on how philanthropic dollars are actually making a real impact.
So, Chevelle, we've had on Black Philanthropy, Our Stories, we have a number of guests that fall at what I'd like to call the spectrum of philanthropy. So from funders to fundraisers, we'll have advisors come on soon. We'll have more philanthropists come on soon. And I always find it so interesting, and I'm always pleased to talk with fundraisers because anyone who chooses that job is, I think, a special human because of the negative connotations that can go along with fundraising, but also the challenges that come along with fundraising, and why so many people often, you might have experienced this when you were a fundraiser, you might run into people who are like, you fundraise? I could never ask anybody for money. That's the scariest thing that I could ever do. And yet there's a whole career and a pathway for people. And so I say all of that also as a reminder to our listeners right now, as we're in the first quarter of 2026, and we know that we are having some real economic challenges, particularly as it relates to Black communities. We have really high unemployment rates, particularly as it relates to Black communities. And we know that of the dollars that are donated each year to communities across the country, Black people receive around 3% of that, which is not a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's about $15 billion. But when we think about how much more could be given, it could be more. And the people that I often think about filling in that gap could be fundraisers who have an understanding of how to acquire those funds. And so I say all of that because, one, why even choose a pathway into, I have never made a phone call on behalf of Harvard. They've not asked me to do that as an alum, but I've never done any phone-a-thons. And I wonder why you have offered yourself in that space of fundraising at all.
My career as a fundraiser, as I mentioned, I started at my high school, the Nightingale Bamford School. As soon as I was able to get my work card, the little blue card we used to get back in the day in my working papers, I was 14 years old, and I got my working papers from Nightingale, and I applied for a job in the business office. So that was my first job at 14 years old. By the time I got to Harvard, I basically had a full ride scholarship, but I had a portion that was work study. So I had to take on a work study job, and I applied for the Harvard Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study. So while I was at Harvard, I was half-time employed at Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study, part-time working. So freshman year, I actually was a top fundraiser. I just got through it. Most credit cards, most renews, most increased gifts, most just back-to-back. People wasn't able to get through to people I was able to call. I find that was a great battleground because, one, it teaches you how to deal with no. It teaches you how to deal with rejection. And it also teaches you how to get through the list, because one no is not going to stop another yes. So that's one. Two, it really taught me that it's interesting, as when you're a successful fundraiser, it's hard to pull you out. So basically, I became a leader afterwards, right? So I wasn't able to make the call, so we saw a decline, but I was able to teach other people my way of doing things. So that was exciting to have that, leadership role. But then three, it was great to be successful. I mean, I was managing a team of 25 students, raising $500K a year. So that was great training for fundraising. It was great training for making the ask. And let's just look at fundraising in general. There's really 4 stages. For anybody who's new to philanthropy, there's really 4 stages of fundraising, right? There's kind of like the identification phase. You're trying to look who are the people that you're targeting. Then you're cultivating these relationships, right? Then the third stage is you're making the ask. So frankly, if you're new to fundraising or philanthropy or fundraising and you're so nervous about the ask, you already skipped 2 steps. Okay. So you really, before you even make the ask, how are you cultivating this relationship? And let me just stop at the ask. Another thing that I learned at Radcliffe was the fact that this was a difficult institution. The alumna, for those of you who don't know the history between Radcliffe and Harvard, Harvard was founded in the 1600s. By mid-1970s, there was a shift where women could start matriculating to Harvard. So the Radcliffe school had a change of identity, right? The Radcliffe target population, the alumni who used to go there, no longer identified with this institute. What is this hodgepodge thing that you came up with from the beloved college that I actually attended? And then at the same time, there's a competing ask, because as Harvard Radcliffe is asking for money, so is Harvard College asking for money, which is now the actual institution. So it was also a great training ground for making a hard ask and being convincing and showing that finally, we talked about identification, we talked about cultivation, we talked about making ask. The fourth stage, that stewardship. That even though this institution evolved, making the connection to those potential donors, return donors, Libans, Sibans, that, hey, you still matter. And more importantly, your story matters, your influence matters, your dollars matter, but more importantly, you're important to this institution, and we want to get you involved more than just asking you for money. So that's a long answer to your question. How did I get involved with fundraising? And then also provide some suggestions for those who are, a little scary about making the ask. The worst they can say is no. And actually, that's the best thing they can do so that you can hang up and keep it moving on. It's the worst when they want to curse you out for something you had nothing to do with. Yeah. But then that's also another great training ground as far as character and dealing with tough people.
I think you sort of sped through the fact that you had the most. And I just wanted to see what you think it was about you as a fundraiser that helped you have the most, that quickly led you to becoming a leader within fundraising.
My commitment to excellence. My commitment to getting the job done. And also, it was incentivized. We got prizes at the end of the week. So if I get, at the end of the month, I'm getting an extra $50, $100. I'm getting a gift card to something. Mm-hmm. But it's funny. I kind of always was like that. Going back to elementary school, I went to the school called St. Mark's Lutheran School in Brooklyn, New York. And basically they had student of the week, get a button, student of the month, get a t-shirt. And came to a point, I think it was first or second grade, I was always getting student of the week, student of the week, student of the month, student of the month. So it came to one time, I was not the teacher's pet, but I was a little precocious to the point where I was grading people's, teacher would give me people's quizzes, I'll grade it out. She's like, oh, Chevelle, you got it all right. Just grade everybody else's, right? So I'm doing that. And I was a little familiar with people's grades. And one week I didn't get student of the week, student of the month. And I actually approached the teacher and I said, why didn't I get it? Because that person got it. I know my grades are way better than theirs. The teacher actually had to talk to my parents and say, Chevelle has to realize that, yes, while she is good, others do have to win and others do have to show that they're involved. So long answer, I just feel as though my commitment where it's incentivized or where there's an ability to be diligent and show excellence and competence in something. And also a fun little extra bonus. That kind of was my drive. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, because I was a director, I didn't get that thrill of calling. I'm over here directing and managing people and dealing with fires and, doing HR and things like that. But it was a great experience to raise, over $200,000 for an institution while I was still in college pursuing two concentrations, majors, economics and African studies, while joining a sorority, Del Simmons Theta Sorority Incorporated, while being baptized at my church, Pentecostal Tabernacle in Cambridge. So it was a full load, but it was just a ever enduring commitment to excellence.
Well, it also sounds like you're competitive, that you like a friendly competition, but also, which is awesome, because I think sometimes within fundraising, if you're in a for-profit space for sales, then that competition is obligatory, right? It's what gets people to do the work that they do because they are incentivized to work harder to compete amongst their colleagues. But I think in fundraising, that's not as promoted, and I wonder what you think about that sense of competition within fundraising, that one could be incentivized by prizes to work harder.
You got to bring the fun back in fundraising. Perfect example. Moving on to my next major career in fundraising at Prep for Prep, which I'm an alumna of. Went there in alumni affairs. There was a change in leadership due to different things. And I basically was the acting director for a good transitional period. During that time, March Madness was coming up, and we were trying to get the alumni numbers up as far as participation. So what did we do? Come up with a March Madness or we you can't say March Madness. We came up with something similar competition between all of the high schools and interschool in New York City. So if anybody's from New York City and a part of interschool, you know the Trinities, the Poly Preps, the Riverdales, the Fieldstons, the Nightingales, the Brearleys, the Chapins, the collegiates. So we paired up all the schools in 3 different ranks based off of size, got to keep it fair, and then had it ranked off a competition. The way that we saw that increase by overall my time at Prefer Prep for the 4 years I was there, my team outperformed the overall organization in fundraising. The CAGR for the organization was about 5.7 and we were at 7.3. So we brought that from $750K to $1 million a year, annually. And then more importantly, we increased the alumni numbers up by 37%. So that competition, along as bringing fun and fundraising. Also, who doesn't love swag? I'm actually really obsessed with swag. Some people hate it, but I love it when it's cool. So that's just an example where not only did we increase our actual dollars, and more importantly, over the 4-year time, because our alumni base is increasing, we were able to keep fundraising and average dollars around $1,720. So basically, we were going up even as we kept the average annual contribution steady, even while the alumni base was increasing. So our team was knocking it out the box, even amidst transition, even amidst different things in the economy and the world. But yeah, that was a great example of putting the fun in fundraising, sending out an email. Okay, well, Chapin's up. We need more people. Who's going to represent Nightingale? We send out weekend updates, getting into the social media. And then also, that was a great opportunity to reestablish relationships with these academic institutions. The way that I was on the phone with the alumni director and fundraising colleague at a Trinity or at Nightingale. So it really reinforced that stewardship and cultivating the relationships between the people in that organization and say, oh, so now that Trinity won, actually you can host that pizza party. Come on, pizza party. Everybody love a pizza. It wasn't really a pizza party, but host the winning competition at the school. And that's a great optic event for photos, for pictures, for the newsletter to say that, look at all these Prefer Prep alums won a competition in the name of our school. So that's an example. You got to get the engagement fun, keep it, just keep it engaging and, fun. Put the fun back in fundraising.
One of the things you talked about when you were at Harvard was that thrill of being on the phone with people. And for many, 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 whether you're in sales, whether you're in fundraising, whether you're just an intern, I've had interns work for Samuel and Marie who are like, I can't leave a voicemail. I can't get on the phone, right? So people are afraid of the phone right now in many ways. And so what is it for you, Chevelle, that gives you the thrill of being on the phone, particularly when you know that you are most likely going to get a no today or more than one no today?
There's always the possibility that I'm going to get a no, but there's always the likelihood that I'm going to get a yes. So one, I always leave with that abundant mind thinking. So I never really approach it with, and then also I approach it with, if they say no, fine. If they say yes, fine. Let's keep going through this pal, right? So that's one address with that. When it comes to being on the phone, you do have to look at your personality. I will say it was difficult for me as we transitioned to smartphones and video cameras and texting and voice notes. It was difficult for me when people said, oh, don't call me. Can you just text me? I'm someone who feeds off of the frequencies. I don't know, call it spirituality, call it spirits, call it vibes, call it frequencies. It's something about the frequency of having that talk to someone, the excitement to hear what they're going through, to say, how was your day? And what are you into? Because our institution wants to know what you're involved in to see how you can be amplified. So it gives a touch point that's more than one, just a direct ask. Two, that doesn't communicate the emotion around things. And three, it feeds into my personality. I can talk on the phone for 3 hours and it'll be like 15 minutes. So it does feed into your personality. And then also, two or three. People just have to deal with their insecurities around rejection. Point blank, period. You're going to get rejected. The faster and easier and the more you go through it, the more you're able to stand and keep dealing with it. So it's either like, are you introvert? Are you afraid of the rejection? Or do you just not like, you're not a phone person? Whatever it is, it's really about having that audit within yourself, that internal audit, to understand, what's your best way of communicating. And if you want to strengthen that, don't lead in, because honestly, if you're sending out bad frequencies, it's going to be, horrible conversation. So do it in a way where you're communicating that's at your optimal as well. But I find this day and age, you see people are going back in, especially fundraising, they're going back to direct emails. They're going back to, sending people to their websites and things like that. They're going back to making calls because people don't make calls anymore. So I can't tell you how many people I'm actually getting in touch with these days. And these are people on WhatsApp across the world, Guyana, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya. I can call them on WhatsApp and I will get them like this, as opposed to waiting for an email, a LinkedIn, or a text.
Why don't you take the rejection personally, Chevelle?
It has nothing to do with me.
It
has nothing to do with me. Why
Pretty simple. Because people take it personally. Because when that is what keeps people from getting on the phone, is because they go through the list and they get that no, and it's about them. Was it my personality? Was it something that I said? When ultimately we know people say yes and they say no for their own personal reasons, of course. But I think for many, many people who are scared of this space, which is being scared of this space can be the difference between being able to fundraise and not being able to make their operating budget or not. It would be a surprise, I think, to no one that you are a fantastic fundraiser, because your energy, your light, it sort of shines through the phone, it shines through the camera. When you're in person, I'm sure you probably, it's like a shakedown. People feel like, how did she take all this money from me? Because it's so easy for you.
Brooklyn, no.
That's right.
That's funny. Right. You know what? On that, I want to say, for anyone that's dealing with fear around that, I was taught in my Christian beliefs that fear is false evidence appearing real. I also was taught God did not give us the spirit of fear, but the spirit of power, love, and sound mind. So those are two guiding principles. And a third guiding principle, if you're scared, do it anyway. Do it scared, but do it. Don't let fear stop you. Because again, not pushing my religion, but just my belief system. The devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Fear is just one of those spirits, one of those frequencies, one of those vibes that's just trying to stop you from pursuing your purpose, stop you from, in fundraising, getting your bag. So why? Don't set yourself up for failure. The only failure is if you don't attempt. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Chevelle, what do you want ultimately your legacy to be in this whole journey for you as it relates to philanthropy?
Wow. I really, as I'm thinking about my grandmother's legacy, I'm actually wearing her dress. Come on.
So beautiful.
So
beautiful. Shoulders. Look at those shoulders. Shoulder pads.
So, as I think of legacy, I'm a dog mom. I'm not a mom yet. And, just thinking what came before me and what's coming ahead of me. It's interesting. I think of what did I want to be when I grow up? When I was at Nightingale, it's my first time around all these, Gossip Girl type people. And, their fathers were ambassadors. I was like, oh, I'll be an ambassador. And they're like, no, you can't really, your family has to be an ambassador. You can't really do that. Then I was working at Lehman Brothers before it tanked. Oh my God, that was a mess in '08. And, I was out with one of our managing directors. He was like, hey, Toots, you want to go to, the brasserie? My guy canceled breakfast for me. I was like, okay. He's like, so what do you want to do? I was like, oh, well, I'm about to graduate from Harvard and I just graduated, blah, blah, blah. And, I want to manage people's money in Africa. He's like, oh, there's two problems with that. I said, what? He said, you're Black and you're female. I said, oh, dude, pray tell. Thanks for informing me of those things. He was just like, people in Africa want white Jewish men to manage their money. So when it comes to my legacy, I want my legacy to be reminding people that you don't fit in a box. You let your light shine. Don't let anybody stop you from going where you need to go. But also make allowances for their doubtings too. I'm grateful that those people worded me up that actually some ambassadors, it is kind of an inside family job. I am grateful that that guy told me in banking, actually, these people are kind of looking for this. So I was able to pivot. I was able to find my niche. I was able to find where I excelled. More importantly, I was able to find where I was able to amplify my work, continue to serve in excellence as a servant leader, but also uplift and connect. So when it comes to my legacy, long answer, it's a desire to encourage people to embrace freedom, encourage people to embrace their true self and their passion for who they are. But in my own road, I want to build those bridges that aren't there. I've been to 55 countries. I've learned so much from around the world that I just like, oh, if only this person would meet this person, so much can happen. So if anything, if I'm just an authentic amplifier, collaborator that reminds the people that they are not one thing, that they should always live in their light and excellence and serve their higher being, God will say, job well done, my good and faithful servant. So that's really kind of what I want my legacy to be.
What is your dream for philanthropy ultimately?
Ooh, to run out of business.
What does that mean?
The reality is philanthropy is filling a gap that private sector and public sector is not serving. Any aid is filling a gap that the private and public sector is not serving. Any nonprofit is filling a gap that the private and public service sector are not servicing. To me, as an economics, African studies, urban planner, social anthropologist, and spiritual being, that means there's a mismatch and imbalance of systems. That means there's a mismatch and inefficiencies in how resources, labor, markets, inputs, and outputs are being allocated. Now that I'm a business owner for 12 years in strategic consulting, because I have so many perspectives, it is a paradox that we have to rely on the oligarchs or the masses to do what is a service gap of public service and private sector. So ultimately, I would like philanthropy to reimagine itself, to think outside the box, to really create sustainable solutions past 2030, to restore human dignity, and just restore our public goods and our public services.
The practice of loving one another. That's what I think of. A lot of us think of philanthropy as the practice of loving one another through our giving. I don't see a world in which that is never going to be valuable, like an important phenomenon to exist. That it has to fill certain gaps, I think, is part of what you're addressing. It's trying to, and sometimes not adequately fulfilling really big gaps in in major ways. But in other ways, that particularly as it relates to Black people, we often, what we talk about on this podcast, of course, is that philanthropy is who we are. Being philanthropic is who we are. That being able to pick up someone's kids, being able to, no, not even just talk about picking up someone's kids, just talking about the money part, right? That we give to our churches predominantly, but we give to one another predominantly, that should somehow be filled by the private sector in some way. To me, I would think would be a real loss for us, because there's real, you know this as well as I do, as a fundraiser, that there is we talked about it previously. There's a two-way street that happens within philanthropy, that there is can be a giver, and there can also be someone who's receiving on that end, but that both parties ultimately benefit. So that ultimately it's not just the receiver, the recipient of that fund, but it's also the donor who gets to transform how they want to be in the world, how they want to be related to that issue, to that problem. So I ultimately look at philanthropy as, I hope it is always here, because it is ultimately human beings supporting other human beings.
I love that you're saying that, and I want to say yes and to me, I love that you went to the root word of philanthropy, and it is love, right? But when I say I want philanthropy to run itself out of business, that doesn't mean that I want the idea of stewardship to go away. In the example you just gave, you talked about the donor and the benefactor, but what about the institution? What about the land? What about the actual public goods, our water, our sea, our education, our air? Those are also beneficiaries. So I think
Yep,
the
that's right.
main thing is that losing that intrinsic tie to money, 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 and really going back to what are we protecting? What are we stewarding? What are we caring for? Because it cared for us. So yes, I yes, and making sure that stewardship and community and love never gets lost.
And now you pivoted 12 years ago into becoming an entrepreneur, which I'm an entrepreneur as well. Many people will tell you, I would love to run my own business. And then you run your own business and you think this is an interesting choice. It's a hard choice. It's a really important choice, transformative choice, but it's not for everybody. So can you just talk about, Chevelle, your pivot into being someone who was solid in institutions, raising money for institutions, and now working for yourself, and what that transition was for you to be an entrepreneur?
Just to quote the great philosopher, the great poet, Jay-Z from Brooklyn, fundraising, it ain't for everybody.
Yeah.
And more importantly, another direct quotation from the great poet Jay-Z, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. So basically, the transition was a lot about that, really understanding the nonlinear side of things. So I started out my career in banking. Then I realized that the banking world, they were just really playing with people's money and didn't really care about the outcomes. And they were totally committed to making the income wealth generation gap bigger. Then I went to the public sector. The public sector, I was building housing and creating neighborhoods. I was getting pursuing my master's at NYU in urban planning. And then I realized the public sector, while they had this great mandate to protect our public goods, unfortunately was operating with great bureaucracies, inefficiencies, and frankly, laziness. Then I went to the nonprofit world. In the nonprofit world, I saw that they were the ones on the ground, grassroots, doing the real meaningful change, always strapped for cash, which you mentioned. The security was great as far as having camaraderie, people, a institution to, fundraise for. So making the leap from, that security of a solid paycheck, benefits, 401k, 403b, that was definitely not for the faint of heart. Becoming an entrepreneur is very feast or famine. And the way that I did it, I after graduating grad school, I had the opportunity to work FIFA World Cup in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And actually, my last class at NYU was that summer in Cape Town. So when I asked the city for time off of work, I was already working there 3 years. They said, and actually, mind you, this is during the housing market crash. Okay, I was there from 2007 to 2010. Housing market crash. I'm working in housing. Okay, so this was now the third round of citywide layoffs. I said, please pick me as tribute. I'm going to South Africa. So from going to South Africa, that then led to a lot of personal and independent African travel. That led me to different opportunities at UNECA in Addis Ababa, doing journalism and coverage of the economic conference out there. Led me to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Botswana, looking into diamond mines. Led me to planning conferences with this group I started at Harvard called Youth Alliance for Leadership Development in Africa, YALDA, which is actually still around. Look at God. We founded that in 2004. So we planned conferences in Nigeria and Egypt. So that really allowed me, long answer to your question, but my nonlinear journey allowed me to see how other institutions operated in different sectors, where were the gaps and opportunities to build connections, and where was a good niche for my business. The final ultimate push was I received a internship or a fellowship in Zambia. And basically, not going to say the institution, but long story short, they said Harvard more than I ever said Harvard in my entire life. I found that they were using my credibility, my gumption, my resource management to secure projects in an unethical way that just didn't align with how I did business. And they were building it off of my name. One thing you're not going to do is kick dirt on Chevelle Dixon's good, credible name. So once I realized what they were doing and I didn't want any parts of it, I went to the contractor, the people we were contracting with, which were ministries. And I said, I'm no longer with this organization. I would love to still continue to do the work. Do you want me because of the institution, or do you want me because of Chevelle Dixon's doing the work? They said, listen, we don't care. Just want the work done. From that, I was working with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, planning the National Youth Week for Zambia. And because I did such a good job with that, I was asked and appointed to the UN World Tourism Organization's General Assembly, which was happening in Livingston between Zambia and Zimbabwe. So once I was able to secure 2 contracts on the continent after just leaving that place, I said I had the confidence to say, oh, I can do this. As soon as I returned in 2013 to the States in May, I put in the paperwork for my business. And by that December 2013, I started Pan-African Solutions. So that's the long, nonlinear journey. To answer your question, what about now? 2025 was the toughest year, not only for our financial year, but for a lot of people in philanthropy, a lot of people in fundraising, a lot of people in nonprofits. The way that the global economic world has changed, political economy on how aid is done across the globe has impacted others, has put strengths on places, but also it created opportunities to create alliances and collaborations. So although last year, I'm going to be 100% honest, was our worst financial year, it allowed us with great crisis is always a great opportunity, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, as Winston Churchill has said. So it created a lot of pressure, a lot of ability to think creatively, and it actually broke down a lot of silos so that people can realize we don't have to do this differently. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's an opportunity for us to align. So long answer to your question. But that's kind of how I got into that journey. And as far as an entrepreneur, it has been feast, it has been famine, but I wouldn't trade it for the world because I get to choose who I work with. I've turned down, all money is not good money. I've turned down money. But more importantly, I get to amplify the work of the people that have vetted that are doing the real, true, credible, meaningful work in the community.
Chevelle, it sounds like whenever you are coming up against a new obstacle, there is another no can lead to another yes and another yes, that there seems to be this mentality of there's always another way, there's always enough. And part of what you and I have talked about in previous conversations was this sense of having an abundant mindset. And so can you share a little bit more about what your own sense of abundance means for you, particularly as we start this new year, and what that could mean for some of our listeners right now who may not feel very abundant right now?
I will say over the last 11 years, like I said, I actually found my grandmother deceased. Sarah Lee Dixon, Grandma Princess. I found her deceased. And that was something really, really hard to get over. So basically, as I had to push through that grief, I had to realize not only who I am, but whose I am. My strength does not come from me. I look to the hill from whence cometh my help. My help coming from the Lord. So that's just my own spiritual grounding. That's just my own spiritual grounding as far as that's concerned. So basically an abundant mindset is understanding, one, not only who you are, but whose you are, and that also the things that are meant for you are meant for you. And there's nothing that's going to stop it as long as you're obedient to your source. That's my personal belief. Also, abundant mindset is kind of, you have to take an internal audit before you take an external audit. And, to the listeners, this is something that you can do as you approach fundraising or philanthropy. And I call it, the abundance audit, So basically, this is kind of like a check of kind of like a rubric so you can just check yourself. For me, ultimately, with my journey, with my grandmother passing 11 years ago, I had to realize that I had everything that I needed. And more importantly, I knew I was abundant when my nervous system was regulated, when I was making decisions clear headed with a calm nervous system, when I was not making decisions out of desperation, when I was not making decisions out of lack, when I was not making decisions out of fear. So, first, it has to be a mindset shift and also a sight shift. When you're focusing on your problem, that's all you see. But when you look to the hills from whence cometh your help, you see a opening opportunities. So one, first look at, what do you have? First step of the abundant audit. What do you have? Right? So we already looked at who we are, took the internal audit. Now we're looking at things. What things? Not only just possessions, what skill sets? What networks? What rooms and access to doors you can have? Do you have a car? Someone needs to drive somewhere. What can you offer? Are you a teacher? Are you a listener? Are you someone who helps organize? What do you have? Again, bringing it back to my spirituality, when God did any miracle using someone, he or Jesus, well, I think the same people, said, well, what do you got? Think of, we have all these people to feed. What do you have? Well, we just have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Oh, what do you got? Well, I just got this cane. Okay, this staff. Well, just put it in the middle of the sea. The Red Sea is going to pass. So it's always about look at what you have. Don't look at what you don't have. That's one. Then look at what do you need now that you have what you have? How can you multiply? How can you use what you have to get what you need? Okay. And this is not money. This is resources. These are goods. These are things. These are skill sets. These are connections. These are relationships. These are introductions. What do you need? 3, most importantly, never have a conversation after you figure out who you are and whose you are, right? You figure it out. What do you have? What do you need? What are you providing? What are you offering? Can you be a teacher? Can you be a singer? Can you sit with an elderly person? Can you donate something from your house of a dress you wore to a prom? Once we do it on an individual level and connect with community, it has ability to scale. And then once you understand these things, create a matrix. This is me. Abundance audit. What do I have? What do I need? What can I provide? Who are your target people? What do they have? What do you need? What can they provide? Then through that matrix, you can figure out at least a starting point. But first of all, you have to audit yourself and realize that you are coming from a place of abundance. And also, finally, once you figure out and do that audit, now the question is, how can you all win? And more importantly, how can the institution or that public good win, right? That's going back to the stewardship part of things. So again, when it comes to it, you could address that for your own personal life, for your community life. You can address that for your career. But using those steps, some people want to make the ask, did you even figure out what that person wanted? Are you just pushing your agenda on someone? Are you having a two-way conversation? So those are things to consider when you're thinking about this abundance audit from a personal perspective and also career perspective as it relates to philanthropy and fundraising.
For people who are hearing that one ought to, could, should do an abundance audit, it's in service for what?
Breakthrough.
How so?
It's a breakthrough in a mindset shift. It's a breakthrough in reassessing and evaluating your assets and what you currently have. And again, that's your possessions, but that's also your skills, your network, the places you have access to. And then also it's the reminder on paper to connect. We can only do things in community. And when you do this abundance audit, you're coming to someone, is ultimately the goal is to set you up to connect, to make the ask, to make the offer. And it's hard to ask someone something if you don't believe you have anything to offer. So the mindset shift allows you to have this rubric where you can literally put things out, get to the ask while you're cultivating this relationship so that ultimately you could lead to stewardship.
If you can begin to get into the mindset of, I actually have things to offer. I actually have ways to be in service of others. That also puts me then in relationship and community with others. Then ultimately, when we could say we have the faith then that our needs are going to be met by being in community with others, that there begins to be this reciprocity that happens by being in community. Was that partly what you're saying, you think?
Absolutely, spot on, and also rooted in authenticity. Because once you take that audit, you're being truthful with yourself. You're being authentic with yourself, and you're also honoring what you do have. So there was an organization called I have to pull it up, the Max Cadet Dental Fund. And they they were having a helmet drive in, I believe, September for people in Haiti. So basically, it's a dental foundation, and they're raising money for people to get surgeries in Haiti. They were fundraising for money or helmets. I was like, how does helmets connect to dental work? Well, apparently in Haiti, because a lot of people are on transport on motorcycles, they get into a lot of accidents. And a lot of accidents damage their jaw. And it could be prevented had they had a helmet on. So at the time, looking at what do I have, as I mentioned, 2025 was a tough financial year. So I didn't necessarily have the expendable, donor dollars that I normally would every year. So I did say, actually, I have a helmet. During the pandemic, I thought I was going to get my little scooter on, and be out in these streets. And I fell once in my internal hallway in my house. And I said, I'm not driving this thing. I'm not doing it. And for 4 years, that brand new helmet, I have locks. It was a big one too, to fit my hair, the special. I donated that. So it was something that, I sold my bike, but 2 years later, I still had the helmet. And I was able to give something that was just in my closet. Actually, it's in my safety bag, my go bag. It's part of my safety go bag. But I was able to donate that to somebody else. So, making sure that we're definitely taking, opportunities like that to look at in-kind opportunities to donate what you have. Or like I said, donating dresses to, I have so many ball gown dresses that, donating that to prom. So that's an example.
That is a surprise to nobody that you have so many ball gown dresses. You're so fashionable, so beautiful. Chevelle, so one of the things that I've been really excited about talking to you about with our listeners is this sense of in kind that I think for many of us who've worked in nonprofits in the fundraising office, we see in kind as like a asterisk, like, yeah, we take money, we take stock, we also take in-kind gifts. We're like, well, what is in-kind and why does it even matter? And so, but it seems like for you in our conversations that we've had previously, you've began to see a real opening, or I should say a gap that could be filled through in-kind gifts. Share a little bit more about why in-kind gifts, particularly right now, could be so transformative for communities.
There was this one nonprofit that approached Pan-African Solutions Consulting to raise $100,000 during the pandemic to purchase 100 laptops for 100 students. So I said, okay, understanding what you need and understanding your institution, I do have a question. What's more important, the $100,000 or the 100 computers? And they said, ultimately, we just want the computers. I said, great, because I know someone at Google who's just said they had a closet of this inventory that they need to give away. And it's a write-off for Google. So you have to understand sometimes, well, not sometimes, money is a conduit. Money and fundraising, you're raising the money so you can get something outside of operating expenses, keeping the lights on and the building running and things like that. But even if you have a good relationship with Con Ed, they may have some in-kind electricity that they might want to send on over. I don't know. So anyway, in short, that's just a concrete example of how we have to, again, shift our mindset. Do we want $100,000 or do we need 100 computers? And sometimes removing that, the money, the conduit of money, actually gets the assets into the hands of the beneficiaries so that they can actually do the work faster.
How does an institution or a nonprofit then start looking for gifts like that, like one or in-kind gifts like that? Because you were able to make that ask on behalf of the institution for computers because you knew somebody. But if you've got, again, a struggling nonprofit that's, limited resources, limited relationship building, which is its own problem, how does one begin to start shifting their mindset from we just need to get these dollars to we actually just need to get the thing that we need, and that there are people who might actually just be able to give us that thing?
Absolutely. Move away from desperation. You have to get out of a cycle of desperation and short-sight thinking as a fundraiser. Every strong fundraising team has an annual plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, the plan to the next anniversary plan. So one, you have to realize that these are long-term relationships. Any donor should not be a one-time donor. They should be a consistent return donor who's actually increasing their gifts over time, not because they have more money, but because you have cultivated a relationship that makes them feel special, wanted, and needed and important to that institution. So one, once you get your mind out of the desperation and the short-term thinking and realize this is not cultivating a relationship for just this fiscal year. It's for the next 5 to 10 fiscal years. And then bringing on not only just that one person, think of galas. There's a great opportunity. Well, even though galas are kind of going out of style now, honestly, but there's a great opportunity in galas to, for instance, a company would purchase a table for 10 people. The employees are sitting at the table. Why are we not engaging those employees to talk to them so that they can have people to understand their stories? They're just there sitting down because the big boss says, hey, you want to come to dinner this night? We got this event going on. But there's a missed opportunity to engage that person who may find a reason to be more involved in the institution. So I would look at it from that perspective.
Chevelle, what do you think is the best way for nonprofits to maintain relationships with donors over time, to steward really, so that each time the nonprofit is reaching out to the donor, it's not just for an ask?
It should never only be about the ask, ever. Look at your CRM. Do you know when this person's birthday is? Do you have automated emails sending out happy birthday to them? Because that's something you could automate and set up, right? Does this person have a child that is going to college or in a certain life cycle, had a parent that just passed? Is there a resource that you can share them that'll help them in their own personal life? Is this person in a career that can influence your community in some way? Can you invite them to give a talk? Can you shout them out? Is there a way to recognize them? Is there a way to tap in to say, if you're a nonprofit that's working with youth, hey, we have this really great youth program. Come and support, community fair, whatever. Come have fun, get engaged. There are so many opportunities to cultivate relationships, the second step of fundraising, outside of making the ask. And if you don't have a relationship, you don't know if they have sons, daughters, you don't know if they like skiing or swimming, you don't know if they have a cat or a dog. How dare you continue to expect anything from them?
I think for so many of us who are on those one-person shows or one-person fundraising teams, you just think it's so hard to maintain relationships because you're just so busy trying to maintain your operating budget. But then again, it's part of what you said, that mentality of desperation and not being long-term minded, where you are only thinking about, I've said this a million times, you're only thinking about next month, next week. And then you get to next month and next week, you're only thinking about next month and next week instead of next year or the next 2 or 5 years. So is helpful for
And
me.
again, as Pan African Solutions Consulting, that's where we saw the opportunity to help assist these boards of these nonprofits and some of these C-suite level or officers have an external audit and reset and rethink of, are they working not smarter, and are they working harder and not smarter? And as a third party entity coming in and giving that assessment and that evaluation, and most importantly, I have the opportunity to see how it's happening, not just in New York, not just in Brooklyn, around the world, and share case studies that in real time, because I just got off the phone with someone in Kenya. I just was talking to an ambassador in Ghana or Guyana, so that is something that is priceless to share, and something to definitely hold on to.
Chevelle, so from the beginning, you've talked a lot about your commitment to excellence. You've talked about being Student of the Week. You talked about why it was a problem when you didn't get that award. That it's you've gone to Harvard, you've gone to NYU, you've gone to really elite institutions. You're competitive. You do the most when it comes to fundraising teams. There is a consistent theme of excellence and doing above and beyond what one might ask is required and what people think of you, more importantly. But I wonder how you've dealt with failure in your life, given how committed you are to excellence, how committed you are as a Black female to showing up in a space that people don't always expect you to show up. What is your relationship with failure? And I'll add to that, is there a particular failure for you in your life right now that has been particularly instrumental in how you move forward?
When it comes to failure, thank you so much. That was very sweet of you for acknowledging, what people would typically consider success, or, in the face of things. When it comes to the idea of failure, it's not a setback, it's a setup. You have to realize that just because a door closes, that doesn't mean that probably was an opportunity for you. So I would say, looking back in my career, some times where I failed, I can think of like 3 main themes. Going back to the discussion of desperation. Me moving before I went to Zambia in 2012, I just came back from, doing the World Cup, and no, that was 2010. But 2011, I had to stay. Oh, I was in Ethiopia. I was traveling around the world. Right. And then after a while, I was just like, okay, I need to get some money. I was a little desperate. And I was able to connect with someone who was doing a trade mission here in the States for some people in Zambia. Out of that desperation, I made certain decisions. Had I had a more clear nervous system and thought clearly, I probably would not have made. Literally, the day before I was getting on a plane, I was offered a job in New York at New York University Africa House. And I was like, you really could have told me this last month before I came all desperate to these people. So one, not to say that was Zambia was challenging, and it did provide opportunities for ultimately my business to start. But the failure there was, I realized I will never act out of desperation, because just poor decisions will be made. And like you mentioned, you're overworking to what end, to kind of mess yourself up. The second example or theme that I saw in like my career as far as failure is not recognizing soon enough when an opportunity was dead. There's certain opportunities that are fruitful. There was one client that I was working with that client before they were a client. I was volunteering since 2009. And then I was able to, over the last 4 years, run their gala and festival under Pan African Solutions Consulting. This Q4, I'm expecting to get, hired again, talking to the CEO. And the CEO actually said, sorry, Chevelle, this year we're going in a different direction. Last year we sold 20 less tables. That's 200 less people to their gala. So unfortunately, you're too expensive. So regardless of wherever that information came up, it was a good reminder of my value. But more importantly, it was just the failure in that is understanding, had I realized that opportunity was dead and, reading that room a little sooner, I would have queued up things better for Q4.
Okay. So you're expecting, you didn't have anything else in your pipeline.
And then the third failure in my career as an entrepreneur, what I realized is the failure to charge the right price. I realized we were charging for some of our services 10% of what we really should be charging. I was charging $2,500 for something I really should have been charging $25,000.
So what was that gap? What accounts for that gap?
Lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, lack of readily data. And I will say that even though I'm not all for AI, I will say the research of getting market research done to understand the correct pricing has been extremely helpful, and realizing like, whoa, people are charging that for that. I didn't even realize, in talking to people at the United Nations, someone was charging $10,000 to make 3 introductions. I'm like, I'm giving away introductions for free. You can charge for that.
Yeah.
So, again, these are things that, as far as failures. So just in conclusion, one, the failure to, and moving in desperation. 2, the failure in not understanding when opportunities were dead and kind of served their turn, the season is over. And then 3, not really, understanding the pricing. To be a little bit wiser on that. So I'm grateful that, now we have the skill set, in structure to avoid those failures in the future.
Have more things in your pipeline at all times. Always be looking.
Also, and then good point, because that was in the beginning of this year, it really made me, again, never let a good crisis go to waste. It was a reminder not to get back in that hustle spirit, but in that as any entrepreneur, you need 7 streams of income, anybody. So if I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, then I'm doing myself and my energy a disservice. So I had to rethink, instead of just being service-based, what are some products that we can come up with so that we can make money in our sleep? So that's something else, that opportunity there as well.
Some people are feeling hopeless. Some people are feeling hope right now. And I wondered where you fall in that spectrum of feeling hope or hopelessness. And if you are feeling hopeful, where that hope might come from.
Again, my hope and my strength come from the Lord. But I will say something that's been helpful, and I learned this from my pastor at Rock City Church, Pastor Mike McClure Jr. When you're beginning to lose hope, when you're beginning to feel pushed against the edge, when you're feeling like, oh man, Lord, I can't take no more of this, you are at the precipice of your breakthrough. So have hope in the fact that you're feeling hopeless, in the sense that, you might need to get to that rock bottom to cry out. You might have to say, Lord, you never said you'll leave your children forsaken, nor leave or begging bread. Mm-hmm. So where's my food? You got to show up. No, seriously.
That's for real. That is for real.
I legit said that to God in December, in the way that I've been cooking in this cold. Mm-hmm. Okay. God provides. He will provide for the sparrows. He will provide for you. And sometimes, because you're so focused on what you can do in your career, your personal life, and your family life, that you need to be brought down to your knees to that point of, man, I only got $1 left in my bank account. What we's gonna do? Look to the hills from whence coming your help. Your help come from the Lord. Again, I'm not pushing my spirituality on anyone. However, I'm saying that's how I find my hope. Because God never left me nor forsaken me. And I've been living alone, not alone, but my parents moved to Rochester when I was 16, 2 weeks before 9/11. The way that my nervous system has been on fleek since 2001 for 25 years has been ridiculous. And through those tragedies, the 9/11s, the blackouts, the housing market crashes, the this, the that, the second coming of the 2.0 of the current, administration, there's been so many jolts. You have to stay steady in the calm. Same way when Jesus was on that ship and the storm was billowing and all them people were saying, Masters, you don't care that we're about to perish in this storm? Jesus was chilling. Calm. calm in a storm. And that's where my hope comes from. Just reminding that character, that mindset that, God did not leave me this far to fail. So maybe he's bringing a storm to push me somewhere else because I'm stuck in where I'm not supposed to be. So ultimately, I would say those who are feeling hopeless, find hope in your hopelessness because you're almost at that edge. You're almost at that place where your breakthrough is coming. So don't worry, it's going to be all right.
Is there anything that you want to share with our listeners before we scram today?
Just a reminder to do your audit assessment, right? Do your audit and really look at what you have from an abundance perspective, right? Your abundance audit. And that will help shift your mindset. So for instance, an example, certain people enjoy traveling, right? Everybody's going to God, dirty December, all these things. Can I just throw some numbers at you? The Black diaspora, let's just talk about Black diaspora because that's what Pan-African Solutions is focused on. The diaspora spend in the U.S. alone of Black travelers in 2024 was $145 billion. Global remittances to Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America, $219 billion. People, that's $400 billion of abundance to me that I just heard. There's an inefficiency gap of how we're managing our assets. If we just rethought how we spent 1% of that $400 billion that we are already spending on trips, on remittances, and remittances are helping our individual families, our individual communities back home for essential needs, food, water, school clothes, school supplies. If we transform that 1% of what we're already giving, that's $4 billion, we can invest in economic sovereignty across the Black diaspora so we can invest in public goods and enabling environments. In this time, a lot of people have been coming to me and us at Pan-African Solutions Consulting saying, hey, I'm not sure about the States. I'm second generation this, first generation that. I might want to relocate or look for, building up my family's land back home. Well, now's that time to take at least 1% of what you're already spending in those remittances and what you're already spending in your travel to really start creating enabling environments. And what we're doing here at Pan-African Solutions Consulting is kind of working with public sector, the United Nations, African Union, CARICOM, with foundations across the globe to really advise them and collaborate and create a framework so that we can capture this 1%. So that it could lead towards collective sovereignty, so that we can kind of structure these unstructured dollars. A lot of us in our Black communities, whether it be Africa, the Caribbean, Black American, SUSU. This idea of collectively bringing our money together so that we can ultimately create public goods that we all need: clean water, safe roads, electricity, clean air, right? So what we're doing right now with Pan-African Solutions Consulting is we're creating a cohort of philanthropists who are interested in learning more about how to access and engage the diaspora in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean. Two, learning we're serving kind of as an expediter. How do you apply for their equivalent of Social Security? How do you set up a bank account? What are the certain steps you need to start a business out there, right? And we're all doing this under the Diaspora Nuru program. And Nuru is Swahili for light or illumination, but it's also an acronym standing for Network for United Resources of Upliftment. So that's what we're focusing on right now. We really have to stop leaking our wealth. We are abundant. Don't you let anybody tell you that we're not abundant. The amount of money that the Black diaspora spends on hair care, beauty care, we have money. There's just an inefficiency of how it's being spent, allocated, and shared in resources. So one, we have to stop leaking our wealth. Two, find actual mechanisms of collective pooling our resources so public enabling environments can be built. And that could be done through a DAF or a donor advised fund, right? So that finally we can, stop the leakage, fill the knowledge gap, audit your assets, and then ultimately have dignity and pride that we are actually uplifting our community. I've seen it done. Help us and come with us and, be a part of that movement of uplifting others in real meaningful ways towards economic sovereignty.
Chevelle, if we want to come on that journey with you, how do people stay in contact with you?
Please send me a LinkedIn message. You see my name right here, Chevelle Dixon. Send me a LinkedIn message first. And it's always great for me to see a picture with the face and also see how we're connected in other ways. And also you can follow Pan-African Solutions Consulting on all socials, IG, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Well, Chevelle, we're so grateful for you today. Thank you for choosing fundraising. Thank you for being the most in all that you do, learning from your failures in being human, and helping so many of us do an abundant audit to know that there is more than enough, that we come from a community of more than enough. For many of us who are theists, we come from a God that is more than enough. And it sounds like part of what you're asking us to do is to think more strategically about how we are using that abundance for each other, which is awesome, which will keep philanthropy keep on going no matter what.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. This was a pleasure.
Our pleasure to have you, Chevelle. Thank you, of course, to our listeners to being a part of this community. We don't take, neither Chevelle nor I take your time lightly. If you're going back on the treadmill, if you're in traffic right now, if you're going back from your lunch break, just a reminder that you are not alone in this work, that I'm here, Chevelle's here, our whole community is here to support you in whatever we need, whatever you need, I should say. So thank you for being a part of Black Philanthropy, Our Stories today, Chevelle.